Welcome to In Conversation with writer and editor Sheila Bender, discussions on the writing life, a monthly chat with writers, publishers, and those who support the literary arts.
This program was recorded at the KPTZ studios in August 2012.
Hi, this is Sheila Bender. Today, in our studio, we have Jordan Hartt to talk about writing and the writing life. He is a writer, a writing teacher, and community and events organizer. Since 2008, he's been the program manager for Centrum's year-round literary programming here in Port Townsend at the Port Townsend Writers Conference. He's the founder of CAB, the independent literary journal that raises money for schools and writing programs around the world. CAB also pairs writers across borders of all kinds to create new work in conversation and hosts readings, workshops, and other forms of community gatherings. Creative work has appeared, his own, in about a dozen magazines. Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
It's nice to talk with you about writing and the writing life. So maybe a good place for us to start is about this endeavor with CAB and how that's branching out into the community. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, CAB actually came about sort of with the desire. The great thing about writing, the thing I've noticed about writing is that when you read, you're actually stepping into the shoes of somebody else. You're actually stepping into the life, into the skin of somebody else, in a way that we really don't get through any other form of communication. When you watch a movie, you're seeing someone on a screen. When you listen to music, you're listening to great music. But when you read, you're actually inhabiting the body of somebody else. If it's a first-person narrative, you're seeing the world through their eyes. You're wearing their shoes. You're tasting the food that they taste. You're smelling the smells that they smell as they walk to their work or their school or things like that. I remember reading Things Fall Apart for the first time, the great novel by the Nigerian novelist Chinua Achebe. And for the first time, I understood from the inside what it was like to be colonized, what it was like to go from one culture to another, sort of a dominant culture within the span of a very short life. And I never really understood that before. I'd understood it from the outside. But reading a novel like that, I think it really changes your life. So CAB, which is an acronym for Conversations Across Borders, was the desire to take the writing life and the desire to take what is it that books actually do, what is it that writing actually does, and just amp that up a little bit. When we write, we're sharing ourselves with somebody else. When we read, we're experiencing someone else. And until we do that, we can't build empathy, we can't build understanding. So CAB is a way of, the prime thing we do is pair writers across borders of all kinds to write in conversation with one another, writing from the other person's point of view.
Give me an example.
So an example is, actually, I did the project myself. Every 3 months, we pair people with new people, and I worked with a writer from Ghana, who was a wonderfully talented novelist. And she wanted to set the story in the town of Elmina, Ghana, which I'd never heard of before and, I didn't know anything about. Turned out Elmina was sort of the point of destination for a lot of African slaves to come across the Atlantic in the Middle Passage. And there's a slave castle there where they were penned and held before they came across in these sort of really crowded boats. So by writing the story set there, we also had scenes that were set here in the U.S. and things like that, so we were really having this conversation, but just as a person and be able to develop and see the world through these new points of view.
Because you were writing
incredible.
In that point of view?
Because I was writing from her point of view. She was writing from my point of view.
And how do you make that arrangement?
It would generally, we connect people. We screen them. There's a long application process that people have to go through. Why do you want to be a part of this project? What's your background as a writer and things like that? There's also, a requirement. As you know, we writers are often very sort of protective about our work. It's sometimes very difficult to work in partnership with another person. So a big thing we do is a lot of training in terms of how do you work collaboratively with another writer? How do you check your own ego at the door? How do you check your own preconceived notions of what the writing is going to become at the door? In ways that I think as writers we're good at doing individually, but working in partnerships, it's an entirely different animal altogether.
When you say we, there's editors, staff with you?
We have a two-person staff, actually, and it's a volunteer staff. But we have a lot of volunteers. We have a lot of interns. We have a lot of community members who have sort of given of themselves to the project. We have about 600 people involved at various levels.
And are these conversations published?
We host them on our website, conversationsacrossborders.org.
And if that would be the place people could go to learn more about how they can be involved in the project.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds very thriving. Does it have a offline presence?
We're doing a workshop in Spokane happening August 26th through the 31st. Veteran writing teacher Sam Ligon, who's a mainstay at the Port Townsend Writers Conference and has been for 5 years. He'll be leading it, and we're calling it the Red State, Blue State Writers Conference. We're taking 6 liberal writers, quote unquote, right, and 6 conservative writers, putting them together in a room physically for 1 week. And the idea is to write from the point of view of the other person's political persuasion, whatever it is. So it's about creating authentic, because so often as writers, just work I've read, we often get into stereotypes. That's a big thing we're constantly fighting. How do I enter another person's point of view, but have it be authentic, have it be capturing an actual person on the page as opposed to a caricature or a stereotype of someone on the page? So this workshop is about taking one of the biggest borders in this country, which is this incredible red-blue divide that we seem to have, where often we can't even talk with one another, and using writing deliberately as an intentional method to step across that border, to step into the mind of somebody who maybe has political views that are completely antithetical to what your experiences have been, to what your life has been, and creating literature or aspiring to literature as a result of that.
Spokane's kind of an interesting place to do that because there's quite a divide, I think, between the red-blue ishness of Eastern Washington and Western Washington.
Yeah, we kind of specifically put it in Spokane because of its purplish sort of nature. It's a college town, but it also has a lot of elements that are kind of exciting. One woman is actually flying from Greece just to take this workshop. She grew up in the United States, and this is one of her passions. Another woman's flying from Oklahoma, and then people are coming from the Seattle area, the Spokane area, and when
is that again?
It'll be happening at the end of August.
So it's very soon. You'll be going
very
over there.
soon. Yeah, I'll be going over there on August 26th, and I'm taking the workshop as well as facilitating it, and I'm scared to death. It's just a major risk to step out of one's comfort zone, but I think that's what writing forces us to do.
So you grow as a writer, you grow as a person, and it's a little bit like saying if you're writing well, you are growing as a person, and in order to write well, you need to open the door to growth.
I feel like literature builds empathy. I feel like literature builds understanding. When I read War and Peace, all of a sudden I'm in Russia in the early 1800s, and I understand what it's like to see not just Napoleon's invading army, but also a situation in which French culture was so valued that it was the dual nature of you're being invaded by the French, but at the same time you aspire to be French. And what does that mean? And how does that have, how can I apply that to living in the 21st century?
So writing really does make a difference.
I feel like it does. I feel like the most empathetic and the most understanding people I know have some kind of writing or liberal arts background.
I could just see all the engineers and software designers saying, But hopefully they're all reading too. And I think that really is the reason we promote the liberal arts and all the arts, is because that is our vehicle for understanding what it is to be human. And part of that is understanding one another. So you are a poet and you're a fiction writer, both,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And when it comes to this empathy idea, which is at the center, I think, of it all for you, how do you feel when you're writing poetry and writing fiction? Is there a difference for you?
It's for me, there's not. What I write are sort of very short narrative pieces. I mean, I don't even know if I'd call them, I'll call them whatever the literary journal wants me to call them in order to get them published. Sometimes I call them prose poems. Sometimes I call them short fiction, flash fiction. I'm really interested, when it comes to my own writing, I'm really interested in sort of the things that aren't said, the underbelly. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. There's a lot that happens in the Pacific Northwest, but it's all muffled by rain. We can't really hear it. And so my work is constantly exploring, or aspires to explore, what is it like to live a marginalized life? What is it like to live sort of on the edges? We're out here kind of on the edges. We live in close relationship to the sea, to the forest, to the sky. What does that mean? How does that play out?
And you sit down with that in mind, or you find that in your work?
I think I find it. If I sit down with an idea in mind, I'm never able to write. If I know what I'm going to write before I stare at the blank page and I have it in my mind, here's what I want to do, for some reason it never happens for me. And I know that my process may be a lot different than a lot of other people's. But I feel like as a writer myself, I have to write to discover what I'm writing about. paragraphs will go by, maybe pages, and I have no idea what's ultimately going to happen. And 99% of the time, it ends up to be nothing. But 1% of the time, when you follow the white rabbit down the hole, all of a sudden it becomes something that you couldn't have imagined, you couldn't have planned out, which is strange because working as an organizer for the Writers' Conference, I feel like everything is planned out 2 years in advance and everything's signed and double signed and signed off on and the room reservations and all these things. So it's an entirely different way of being. That I'm not really comfortable with, but that's only when the work yields itself up, when you let it go and let it becomes whatever it needs to become, it seems like.
Right. So you have to keep that frame of mind, but then leave it at the desk sometimes.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Although really a part of us always has to be operating that way if we're going to sit down and trust our images and trust what irritation brings us to sit down. And
it's the letting go that's the hardest part, but it's also the part I feel that brings results. Trying to control a character on the page is just a non-starter, and all of a sudden they're doing their own thing, and you're watching them, and you have no idea where they're going.
But you have to let them go.
You have to let them go to those places.
Right. Well, now that you brought up the job at the Port Townsend Writers' Conference, that certainly is a part of your writing life, even if it is an organized, planning 2 years ahead sort of part, because it has some wonderful benefits in terms of being immersed in the life of writers. Do you want to tell us some of how you've benefited?
It's been incredible. I feel like I give during the Writers' Conference, I'm usually working 24/7 around the clock. So I feel like I give everything that I have and then some. But I feel like the conference has given me so much more back. Just in the people I've been able to meet over the last 5 years, the writers who have come through, and I don't even mean the professional writers who come and teach, but all the participants who come to the Writers' Conference. It's sort of this stone soup gathering every year where everybody brings something. I put the stone in and I put the water in, and everyone brings whatever the ingredients are. And from year to year, you don't really know what you're going to get because it depends on who's going to be there.
So the part of the job that you seem to really love is the same as sitting down and writing, the unknown of what that soup is going to be.
It's the unknown, and it's the community, I think, more than anything.
I think most people in Port Townsend do know about Centrum and all that it offers, but perhaps you can tell them where to find more out, especially about the Writers' Conference.
Sure, yes. Centrum is the umbrella organization for many different festivals, including the Acoustic Blues Festival, the Jazz Festival, the Festival of American Fiddle Tunes, and VoiceWorks. It's all at www.centrum.org. We do year-round programming. Centrum residencies happen from mid-August all the way around through mid-June. And then, as you know, mid-June through mid-August is our summer festival season. We also have writing intensives that you led one very recently, June 14th through the 17th, which is sort of a pared-down version of the Writers' Conference. The Writers' Conference has about 300 people. Our weekend intensives focus on 10 to 14. We bring in one or two master writers. For example, we had you and Arizona writer Meg Files here in June, and a very small group. It's a lot more intense, it's a lot more focused, and it's a lot shorter. But the amazing part is seeing people's lives change as a result of it.
In case you have just joined us, you are listening to Sheila Bender and Discussions on the Writing Life. Today, Sheila is interviewing Jordan Hartt, Program Director at Centrum.
This is actually going back to the Writers' Conference, but a couple of years ago, a woman had come here from Philadelphia. She worked as a Verizon sales rep, but she really wanted to write a novel, so she came to work with Chris Abani. It's a 7-day conference, and on day 6, she came up to me and said, I just want to let you know, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I just called my boss back in Philadelphia and quit, and I'm not going back to work there. And I asked her why, and she said she realized once she disconnected from her quote-unquote real life, she realized that her real passion was education and teaching younger people how to, again, going back to the idea of building empathy through reading and writing. That was what she wanted to do. So she quit her job. She went back to Philadelphia. She got another job at a nonprofit working with students in the inner city of Philadelphia. And I got an email from her actually a couple months ago, and she's now one of the directors of the organization. They're expanding, they're growing. She's totally thrilled. And none of that would have happened, or it would have happened later, if we hadn't provided sort of a place for her to think about what she really wanted to do.
I always think about writing. I have a very good friend who said, when you're a writer, everything is writing. And I also think nothing is wasted. So it sounds like she had all these skills from her job that she put to good use in her new life as a writer. I had a student once who, after reading a book that I had on my, I'm going to say itinerary, that's not right, on my syllabus, Rollo May's The Courage to Create, and this was freshman comp, and I wanted people to read this because I really believe that creativity takes courage. And it sounds like you're saying that about letting your characters go where they want to go, about putting people in rooms together, people who have very different ideas about life. All of this takes courage, and all of this makes a difference. Anyway, the result of this particular person reading The Courage to Create was to drop out of school because he had a creative project that was very important to him, and it actually did take precedence. You never know what you're getting into with writing as with other arts. And we do live on an edge because it's the edge of perhaps failing, perhaps taking this huge misdirection, like the woman who quit her job, doing what other people would think is absolutely crazy. And yet we do it. Why are we so hooked?
I absolutely, Tom Robbins once said to fuel magic, it takes risks and it takes extremes. I think what we do at Centrum is we provide a safe place for people to be able to take risks, a place where they can take a leap, they can take a risk, they can try something new, but providing the safe and supporting and nurturing environment where they can safely figure out who they are, what they want to do, why they want to do it, not just artistically, but like you said, also in their lives. But again, not just in their lives, but also artistically. One thing I see the most at the Port Townsend Writers Conference is I see a lot of angst, especially among younger writers. They come in with all these unwritten novels that they feel like they have to write. They come in with the weight of the world on their shoulders sometimes. They walk around, very brooding, very somber, these big heavy satchels over their shoulders, full of drafts and all of these things. Just feeling like they're failures because they haven't written War and Peace, they haven't written Anna Karenina, or they haven't written Beloved or whatever it is. And one of the things that I think we do well is to be able to provide a place where they don't have to write the books they think they should write. They can write whatever it is they actually want to write, or whatever it is they actually feel like their voice is the only one that can tell. Instead of trying to be another writer or trying to be another person or trying to please somebody outside themselves or please imagined readers, they can sit down and say, what's my story? Why do I want to tell it? How do I want to tell it? We had a high school group for the first time at the conference that happened this year. We had 16 high school writers, and we've never really taught high school writers at the Writers' Conference before. It's always been for people 18 and above. And being able to be there and see their energy coming in, to be able to have them come in without all of the angst and all of the weight on their shoulders and charge upstairs to where Chris Crutcher led this incredible week-long class. One thing he said to me, Chris Crutcher, he was our youth faculty member, is he really enjoyed being able to teach writers before they'd made all their bad habits, before they'd made all of their mistakes, to be able to say, here's the path to go down. The other thing that I think is great about Centrum is, 2 years ago we had a woman give a craft talk entitled How to Become a Writer in 10,000 Easy Steps, which is, at
least they're easy.
At least they're easy. What we're able to do is say, if you're on step 1, we're here for you. If you're on step 9,000 and whatever, we're here for you. Everyone who comes to the conference is at a different place. Some people have literally never put pencil to paper before in their lives, and they just want a safe place to be able to do that. Some people come who have published 4 or 5 books, and they still come as participants to be a part of a community, to get inspiration in the natural environment, and to take, maybe it's their 10,000th step.
Well, and also that metaphor of Tom Robbins of fueling magic. Such a wonderful phrase, to fuel the magic. And what was the rest of it? To fuel the magic, you have to have.
I maybe it takes risks. It takes extremes.
And risks and extremes. Yeah. And for many people, entering the Centrum environment is actually a risk because you're moving from one tribe, the one you see every day, the one you know, to a new tribe that you feel maybe is your tribe, but you don't quite know. And I think that I was an attendee at Centrum several times, and for me, a lot of the wonderful part of the experience was being with my tribe, the tribe of people who are going to take risks in a certain way, who are going to learn that they, as writers, are beginners always. I mean, when you're a beginner and you see those novelists returning, you get the idea that you're not alone, that when you sit down at that page to do the work that you want to do or think you have in you, you're beginning. And there's help in the form of other writers and other people who can provide perspective, but there's no guarantee that you can do what it is you feel. It's not even that you feel you can do. And so to be around other people who are engaged in that process is reassuring.
It's wonderfully reassuring, and it's really reassuring to see other people going through the same struggles that you are, the same failures that you are, but to know that it's okay, that struggle and failure is totally a part of the process. It's not a judgment on you as a person. It means that you haven't exactly found exactly what you want to say yet.
It's the taking of the risk that feels the magic, not necessarily the success.
Exactly.
So about those satchels, which is such a wonderful image that you see these people arriving with their satchels full of the novels that they think they should be writing. Do they put them down? What happens? Do they start carrying a notebook?
It varies by the person. Yeah. I mean, I've seen people come through Centrum and they leave sort of the same way they were, still stuck. And unfortunately, that's part of it. There's one young woman I'm thinking about. She graduated from Goddard College, and she had her MFA in 2005, and she kept coming to Centrum, and it seemed like she was coming for something, and I wasn't sure what it was for. And she kept taking workshop classes, and she had a specific draft she was trying to push, trying to get to its level. And one day I happened to ask her, do you enjoy your story? Are you happy that you're writing it? And she didn't. It wasn't a story that she really felt connected to or passionate about, but it was her thesis story or one of her thesis stories, and she felt like she owed it to herself to prove that she could publish it in these other things. And in a conversation like that, she actually stopped writing longer, more formal stories. She started writing in this new voice, and I think she has a collection of shorter pieces coming out actually next year. The stories that she wanted to tell. A lot of it is coming and letting go of who you thought you were as a writer or having the opportunity to embrace something new.
Right. So every day you get to practice that and feel that.
Like I was saying, it's an incredible gift to be able to watch 300 people at various states making whatever. And sometimes it's not even an artistic discovery. One woman went home and she divorced her husband a week. She filed for divorce a week later.
That can be,
and that can be good. That can be bad. I mean, it's everything. Yeah. Everyone's different, but
living the life you want to live and leave. Funny, I said that. Knowing the life you want to leave and knowing the life you want to live is an artistic discovery.
I think so.
I really believe that.
I think so too.
And I think that writing does change your life. It's always been my contention with poetry and personal essay writing and now memoir is that when you have created this thing to live outside of yourself in the vessel you've created for it, whether it's a poem or a book or an essay, that very huge thing that used to be churning around inside of you lives somewhere now. And it's not that you're disconnected from it. You're always connected, but it settles down in some way. And until you make the decision to write it and allow yourself to write it, you are not necessarily living the life you want to be living. You're trying to. So I find writing the most valuable tool that I have.
Yeah, I think while reading is important in terms of understanding somebody else, writing is a gift that you're giving not just everybody else, but also yourself. You're saying, I'm giving myself the gift that I've written this, that I've shared this, that I've shared it with somebody else and connected to somebody else. But I also think there's a lot of value that comes from face-to-face conversation at a conference like this. We're there to produce reading and we're there to produce writing. But a lot of the discoveries are the relationships that are made, the friendships that are formed, the connections that are made. I don't like the term networking because it sounds so, it's agents and editors and networking. That's not really what we do. We're not there to help someone meet someone who will help them get ahead in their career, but we are there to pair people together or connect people who will support each other in their writing lives.
And your peers in your writing life are your most valuable resources and assets. I remember deciding to go to graduate school at the University of Washington, and I was a non-matriculating student, and my teacher at the time was the late poet Richard Blessing. And he told me, by all means, you must go to graduate school because those are the people that will be your peers for the rest of your writing life. He didn't say you must go to graduate school to study with so-and-so and so-and-so, which was fabulous. I loved everyone I studied with. But he said that, and it really struck a chord with me. I hadn't thought about it that way, that my classmates were the next generation of, in this case, poets, and they would be the people I would be with and stay with and develop a very important writing relationship with. And as you know, writers develop quite an intimacy because of the nature of writing. I think as a writer that when we write, we're developing intimacy not only with our reader, but with ourselves. We become way more aware of who we are. To have peers in that process is crucial.
Yeah, I think it's, like you said, absolutely crucial. The concern I have sometimes with MFA, and I did an MFA as well. The concern sometimes I have with conferences or MFA programs is that it can become, if you have peers that you feel like you're competing against or competing with, or when someone publishes a piece and a writer feels like they are somehow less important because someone else is getting ahead, that's the kind of connection and communication that I feel like is disadvantageous to a person or a writer. But if peers are coming together to support one another, regardless of who's appearing on what show or in what publishing house or whatever, I think that's when it's really valuable.
Right.
When
it
people
does
are
get hard,
together, it does get really hard.
I've heard a number of writers tell me that once they achieved success, their writing group wasn't so interested in them anymore, and it was jealousy. And that is really a hard thing. I think that it's survivable, and if your one writing group doesn't work for you anymore, you can cultivate another one. And it's sad because we have formed such deep connections. So I think you're dead on right with that. We only have a couple of more minutes, Jordan, although we could talk certainly for the rest of the day. Are there some areas that you wished I had asked you about that you might take the time?
The other thing I wanted to mention is that the 2013 Port Townsend Writers Conference will be happening July 7th through the 14th. That'll be the first week. And the second week will be July 14th through the 21st. And all the information on that is available at www.centrum.org.
So even though we have to let our characters go where they want to go, we have to be ready for surprises and not control things, we need to plan ahead to have this wonderful experience. Right. So I just, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and to talk to us about CAB, which I hope everybody looks up, and hope you'll check back and let us know about your experience sitting in that room with someone of a very different point of view.
I will do that. Thank you, Sheila.
You've been listening to In Conversation with Sheila Bender, discussions on the writing life. If you have a writing challenge, author, or question you'd like us to include in future conversations, email us at sbender@writingitreal.com. Producer, sound engineer, and editor Sheila Kalav, executive producer Larry Stein, and announcer Kurt Vanderslice. You are listening to KPTZ 91.9 FM, Port Townsend.